Great. I'm sure as senior parents, you guys are feeling, in many ways, how I'm feeling now when I look around the room and recognize that 4, 6, 3 years have moved so quickly, and it wasn't too long ago that boys were just finishing an early experience and getting a t-shirt and excited for their future here at this school. So on behalf of our institution, I want to thank you for trusting your most prized possession with us. And I hope tonight will be one of many examples of how we're going to try to help steward you through what can be a very daunting process. And I can say this with complete confidence that we have an incredible team who knows our students, who knows how to work with our students, and who has great relationships and partnerships with colleges and universities and admissions counselors and directors across the country. And they've really worked, especially through this pandemic, to strengthen those relationships, to build new bridges and fortify the existing bridges that we have. So I just want to welcome you officially to this evening. It's great to have people in school again, and it's my pleasure to turn this over to Mr. Thomas Claiborne to begin us in prayer. Thank you guys. Welcome back.
Just bow your heads with me in prayer. Father, many plans are in my heart, but I pray that your purpose prevails. Let your will be done in my life, and let the plans that you have released in heaven be aligned here on earth. I pray that I understand your purpose for me so that I do not stray away from it or forget it. Let my desires become aligned with your purpose so that you are not conflicted in my lifestyle. This is the prayer of my heart. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Claiborne. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are so excited, as Dr. Folan said before, to have you back on campus as we're starting our event. Hold on a second. I need some help with the clicker, I think. It's a great team who can't click it. Do you want to bring the laptop over? I'll hit the space bar. All right. As we get going here, I think one of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight and is going to constantly come up is basically the way that we're going to be approaching the process and the way that we're going to work together over the next, whether it is 6 weeks, whether it is all the way up through May 1st, in terms of how close we are working together as we're working on some of these relationships and decisions that are going to feel monumental, but I think we shrink them by the fact that we work together so collaboratively as a team. And so the way that tonight's presentation is going to go, we're going to start with a very kind of general overview of what national trends have looked like. I think as we emerge through this window, we are reading many different things in terms of what everything COVID-related means to the college process. And so we're going to be talking with you basically about what those national trends are and how they apply to CM students, to boil that down for you and your son and your family specifically. After we do that, we'll talk a little bit about what the process is going to look like just on the CM side as we go through. And then we'll go over a couple process steps in terms of score, and then how you can approach the process in terms of writing your essay and some of those key aspects of the process that are involved there. Before finally we turn it over to our guest speaker tonight, Mr. Greg Cherry, who's a Senior Associate Director of Admission at Dartmouth College and is a great friend to CM and understands our boys. And I think he's going to be able to cater that message again in terms of what we have experienced overall and what we are seeing as national trends and how we boil that down. So let me just grab, hold on one second, let me grab that. We're going to figure it out. Hey, that's the way, it's all about adapting over the last 18 months, right? We take a couple things and we adapt from there. All right, space bar for me. Hey, here we go. Boom. All right, so welcome. And then one of the things that I want to talk about and kind of lead the way as we go through the evening tonight is when we were when we were going through and talking to admissions representatives in the spring, and we were saying, okay, listen, we're coming out of this period. There are a lot of the hard data and hard data points that we've associated with college admissions in the past. What are we looking for that might be a non-academic skill that a kid would have? And one of the things that kept on coming up was this theme of radical inclusion, which is a phrase I think is particularly relevant when we think about everything that we've experienced in the last year and a half, where we have been pushed apart in many ways and forced into those bubbles, and we've overcome tremendous obstacles. And something that colleges are going to be thinking about as they're building their classes is, who are the people who pull people in? And as we're having this conversation tonight here in person, right, how did you go above and beyond when maybe those extracurricular events weren't the way that you thought they were going to be, sports and activities didn't look the way that you wanted to be? Who found a way to kind of go out, find someone else, pull them in, and carry them along so that we could move together as a community? And so as we're thinking about some of the ways that that can translate, right, we're going to keep on hearing about from the pandemic, hey, learning loss, and what kids don't have. And when I think about that deficit mindset and how that applies to a lot of the college process, and that how can really drive stress and fear and anxiety about it, I think maybe we need to recenter about some of the things that we have gained and some of the things that we do have in terms of the ways that we have learned. Some people who live their entire lives with accommodations that we were forced to live with for a short amount of time. People who might not be able to go out into crowds, people who are forced to work with technology all the time, people who are separated away from each other. And again, that theme of radical inclusion, how do we pull those people back into us? And so what I think we should be thinking about is maybe, you know, again, from that fear mindset, I'm sure many of you with students who were juniors last year and seniors this year, you've seen some of those trends about test optional policies, and numbers are skyrocketing in terms of admissions. But when we look at these numbers, right, it's many institutions are going up, but a lot of the news stories that you are going to read are going to be about those most top selective institutions. There are many colleges out there that are they want students very badly. They want our students very badly, that they're looking at the landscape. And so something I definitely want our students and parents to take away from this is the amount of power that you have in this process, that you are not someone who, you know, I'm not slapping together an application and throwing it in to be one of 40,000, right? I'm finding a place that is my match and a place that is a specific match for me, and I'm trying to find that match. And if we're going to go, sometimes we're hearing stories about males and learning loss and males not keeping up. That is something that plays to our advantage as an all-boys Catholic school, right? Like if you're looking at national trends and fewer boys are attending colleges, that is an opportunity. So some of the schools up on the board where we've seen declining male enrollment, right? That is a way that you could approach your search of saying like, okay, this is something that I have. And when we're thinking of what makes you maybe stand out a little bit more or be a fit for a school, there are a lot of ways that you might look that you wouldn't have intended otherwise in the college process. Up one more for me. And so the big thing that I think is going to keep on coming up over the course of this process, right, in terms of the ACT and SAT requirements and the fact that so many schools have gone test optional. And I love this quote from Fair Test, which is, I think, kind of at the heart of why so many people in the high school offices across the country, why so many people in college admissions office, right, when we're going test optional, understand that most people do not like working with College Board, right? That we have gotten to a place where we have this basically worldwide national regulator in terms of what is and is not a good way of evaluating college applicants, that in some ways overshadows what we do in high school classrooms. And then, I mean, we have to move our schedules around to have tests on our campus. Colleges are trying to get the test to arrive on time. There are a lot of reasons that we don't particularly like working with College Board. And if we go to the next slide here, what we learned from the SAT and ACT is not necessarily the things that we think that we do. So in 2010, there was a study by I'm getting ahead of myself here. When we're thinking about those test optional policies and some of the articles that we're reading these days, understand that when we're talking about learning loss, in some cases, that is coming from those organizations themselves that are paying people to write op-eds. And when you think about the cycle of testing, College Board and the testing complex is a billion-dollar industry, or billions-dollar industry. There is going to be a constant push there to reinforce that kind of deficit mindset of, you really need this, otherwise you won't be able to get in. You have to have this. And what we are seeing more and more is you don't necessarily have to have those things. And now we'll go to the next slide, and this is the one I was going to be thinking about before, in terms of how college admissions offices see those test results. Basically, how does it help them admit a class? How does it allow them to admit a more diverse student body? How does it allow them to read and understand their students and expect how they would be impacted by retention? And this is a better way to visualize that. The blue is going to be people who strongly or somewhat agree. So in terms of, we jumped a couple spots there. Hey, we're coming back. GPA and SAT, in terms of what that teaches us, College Board did this study in 2010 about what happens when the test score and the GPA are different. In most cases, 2/3 of cases, test score and GPA were consistent. In the third of cases that weren't, if we look at the split, half of those students had high test scores and low GPA, half of those students had high GPA and low test scores. So if we're looking at the predictors, both is great, but in most cases, high school GPA is a better predictor of college success than we've had before. So when we think about test optional policies, right, the test is a nice to have, it is not a need to have in terms of determining who's going to be successful at the college level. And then we're going to look at in terms of how that breakdown even functioned, right? So of those 1/3 of students, 1/6 of students where the test was higher than their GPA, or the other 1/6 of students where their GPA was higher than the test, we have a breakdown here along a couple of different lines. So most of the time, the group that has a higher test score and a lower GPA is male students. If we break that down even further, if we break that down during demographic lines, mostly white male students will have a higher test score and a lower GPA. Historically speaking, at Catholic Memorial, our students do not test better than our GPA. Our GPAs are more reflective of what they can do in the classroom. They're higher than the SAT or ACT score, and that's due to the fact that we've been focused on project-based learning and not necessarily teaching to a test. So the fact that we have these test optional policies helps most of our students. And I've heard definitely the talk of, my son is a white male student who's applying and there's more applications spiking up, and what will that do for his application? The reality is, unless your son tests better than what his GPA is, he's probably benefiting from this policy more than he's being hurt by the policy. If your son does test better than his GPA, well, then we do have the opportunity to say, like, hey, we'll submit those test scores. That's something that we can throw in, and that's a way that they can sort of round out their application. So I'm hoping that it's a visualization of kind of where things are going in terms of testing that is going to remove some of that fear of, I don't have a good test score. It was difficult to get a good test score. We're offering the test on October 13th. I think that's the Wednesday. Right, we're going to take it then, we'll see what number we get, but that's not going to be the end-all, be-all of your application. And so overall, when we think about kind of the way that things have shifted post-COVID and as we're entering into the 21 and 22 landscape, it's important to think about things have shifted in CM's favor and in our students' favor in a lot of different ways. We benefit from the new policies more than we are hurt by them. So when testing and geographical barriers go down, that opens up windows for opportunities for our students to go a little bit farther from home. The geographic diversity of if you get out of the Northeast, people are definitely looking for you. And then what people are looking for more than anything from high school programs, right? Strength of the student in the school. We want to put you in context about what you did at Catholic Memorial that might be unique or different than what you did anywhere else. And this gives us an opportunity to do that. The individual counseling that you get from a fantastic team that is going to sit down with you, your son, your family, and walk you through steps of the process. Those are going to be things that give you an individual application that will stand out compared to others and why you would be a fit for that school. We have a great faculty. Our faculty builds relationship with our students. We have been telling students so far, right, you want to get one letter from a junior teacher, but because junior year was aberrational, if you were getting a teacher letter from someone who you had in freshman or sophomore year who might know you outside of the classroom, that would be a good way to round yourself off. In ways that we would not recommend in previous years, if you go for a teacher you had in your underclass years who knows you well, right? Well, I was wearing a mask, I was only in the building 2 days a week, I don't feel a strong connection to my junior teacher, that's fine, that'll work for you. So we're playing into our strengths right now as we're going into the process, and I think that shows in the way that we had such a strong acceptance list and matriculation in the class of 2021. We had 41% of our students accepted to schools that are considered most selective. That was our best year ever. Some of those schools are up on the board right now. We are getting to a place, right, where the great work that we have done at Catholic Memorial and that theory of kind of that radical inclusion, how do we work together, how do we collaborate, how are we innovative together, those are playing well in the college admissions process. And so just to give a sense of the growth that we've experienced as a school, sometimes it's like, well, it's not my father's CM anymore, and really, this is not your older brother's CM. If we're tracking our trends over the last 8 years in terms of that selectivity breakdown, so 2014, that is the year before Dr. Folan arrived on campus. 2018 was my first year in the office when we see that class, and then obviously last year's class, how we're seeing that sharp increase in the way that we're working with students and prioritizing the college application process and that individual application. I am not by any means pushing everyone here to apply to an Ivy League school. Not everyone here has to apply to BC. But what a big takeaway that I want you to have from this is that you have a lot of power in this process to determine where you want to go and how you want to be considered. Not everybody wants to or should go to, a most selective school. I didn't go to one. I turned out fine, right? And that was something that worked for me both in terms of an academic fit, a student life fit, and also, just what I wanted to do financially. It was a better fit for me. But those options are there as we're considering that. And having a consideration of where do I want to go, why do I want to go there, and what do I want to do once I get there, that process has started in the discernment process and what we're going to be doing throughout the rest of the process. So we're very excited, despite what fear-mongering might happen in the national media sometimes, in terms of what this means for our students and where we're going from here. And I think that idea of you can go to a lot of these places, but you ultimately get to choose. And I want to empower everyone, again, as we're thinking about this, I don't want us to be measuring success with that graph on the left, right? I succeeded at this level, I have this GPA, and now what is the rank of my college, right? What number can I associate with the college that I'm going to? Instead, part of our success is just giving you the flexibility to decide on a place that is going to support your mental health and your physical health, that is going to be an institutional fit that is aligned with your values and what you want to do and what you want to study. Student life, which has been a major factor in most people's experience at CM, we want that to be a factor in your experience in college. So how are you going to experience those things as well? So again, numbers are great, numbers are fancy. Hey, look at those numbers, aren't they pretty and fun? I want you to find the place that is the best fit for you, and that's where we're going to be approaching the process from all along, all right? And so we've got a great team. You're going to hear from everybody tonight as we get going. The way that our counselor assignments break down, we have Ms. Kaplan, who is now Mrs. Schneider after she got married on Labor Day weekend. Congratulations. She is going to be talking a little bit about some of the aspects, basically, of how we approach this process. We're happy to welcome Ms. Kistner, who will be going at the end of our presentation, and then we still have Mr. Claiborne doing fantastic work with our students all across the evening and through the semester. So, Ms. Kaplan, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello. All right. So I want to take a moment and step back and recognize the journey that all of you students and families have gone through for the past year and a half. From spring 2020 to fall 2021, you were the first class in CM history that we have asked to navigate full in-person learning to full virtual learning to hybrid learning to now full in-person learning again. And that was not easy. We understand it was not easy for us. And what I want you to recognize is that you responded. You responded to that challenge. You were resilient. And I want you to keep that spirit of resiliency as you move through this process. For the first time in the spring of your sophomore year, when we were fully virtual, we encouraged sophomores to attend college rep visits for the first time. And you again responded. You came with thoughtful questions, you were engaged, you put on your CM uniform from your bedroom, and you hopped on those calls. And that took a lot of courage. And I want you to remember that courage again as you move through. When you didn't think you'd have extracurricular activities, we killed it in sports. So I want you to remember those moments because you should be very proud. And there are going to be ups and downs through the college process. It is going to be challenging, but you can do hard things because you've just done them for the past year and a half. So as you move, next slide. As you move into this next season of your life, I want to remind you that we're all in this together. One thing that we are excited about is that in some ways, we've had to be creative and pivot, but some of those pivots have actually allowed for communication and information to be more accessible to students and families. So we personally, and I'm sure you appreciate this as well, you can schedule a meeting with us over Zoom so you don't have to leave work early or take a day off of work. We'd like to give you the award for most informed parents. You guys really stepped up all of last year, attending the counselor coffees put on by Mr. O'Keefe, and attending all of the other financial and college-related virtual sessions. So we appreciate you for that. And we just want to reassure you that we are going to continue to have conversations with our college partners to make sure that we are keeping up with emerging trends, to make sure that we are supporting your son's unique journey, to have all the information that he needs to be successful in the process. And I will just again reiterate what Mr. O'Keefe said, beware of those easy fear-mongering narratives. There are a lot of articles out there that are meant to instill fear. Trust the people in your bubble. Trust your team, trust your parents, trust us. Don't take advice from people who know less. So our process changes for the fall remain pretty unchanged, but of course we have to continue to adapt to the emerging trends that are going on. So we are excited this year. Last year we were only able to host college reps virtually. This year we're excited, a lot more colleges are traveling, so we started hosting reps on Monday. We were really excited. We had St. Anselm on campus today, and we had, I think, 20 students in the room, and the energy was great, the students were excited to be here, and the reps are so excited to be back on campus. I want to reiterate again, I think that Mr. O'Keefe has kind of drilled it home, but test optional truly means test optional. If you are not sure if you should send your scores, have a conversation with your counselor. Your scores may be an asset at one school, and another school, they may be worth holding back and letting a college evaluate you on the rest of your application, which is stronger compared to your test scores. Finally, campus visits still are a little bit tricky. So I would say the majority of colleges, I'm not sure of any colleges actually that aren't still offering virtual visits. Take advantage of those. Utilize those before you go and spend a lot of money booking a flight or a train ticket. Let that kind of be a preview to the school and then decide if it's worth going for a visit to see whether you can really see yourself there. And finally, communication is so key in this process. Parents, students, please keep us in the loop. We will keep you in the loop as well, and that will allow you and your son to be the most successful through this process. I wanted to draw attention to a prompt that was added to the Common App in response to COVID-19 that is actually staying this year as well in your application cycle. So you have your main Common App essay, and there's also a COVID-19 prompt. And I really want you guys to ask yourself a couple questions before you discern whether to write this prompt. So the first one is your experience different from other people's? Were you stuck in your house, you watched more TV than usual, your parents and your siblings got on your nerves, or did you have someone in your family that got very sick? Did you have to step up to take care of your siblings? Think about experiences that may have set you apart from others. Are there noticeable changes on your transcript? Did you have a bit of a dip? Was that related to virtual learning? It would be helpful to provide some context there. Which does bring me to the last question, connect with your counselor. If your counselor is already planning on sharing the learning challenges you had junior year in your letter, you probably don't need to share it as well in that prompt. So make sure you and your counselor are on the same page. Are you aware of your privilege? Were your favorite snacks not available at the grocery store? How does that pale in comparison to someone who didn't know where their next meal was coming from? So consider your privilege. And are you being specific? This is meant to give your academic progress and career context rather than being a place to sort of complain about how difficult and annoying the pandemic was. So key takeaways, right? Catholic Memorial has been through a huge period of growth regarding our college acceptances and matriculation, and you have all stepped up, students and families, and responded, and we're excited to continue that momentum. I like this quote here from one of our West Coast reps. I wish more schools did this. So we were able to assign grades when many other schools were not able to do that. And in response, I wish more schools did this. Students who succeeded have proof they are resilient. Students who struggled can be excused by the circumstances. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as you move forward. And finally, we want to reassure you that we are a team. And in order to be successful, sometimes it is helpful to assign certain team members different roles, right? So that brings us first to the role of the student. This is your process. You should drive the bus. This is an exciting and scary time, but we want you to take ownership over it. The best thing that you can do is do well in your classes. That is the single most important thing that colleges care about. Meet with admission reps. Go on SCORE. Mr. Claiborne will talk about how to sign up for virtual and in-person visits. Come with purpose. Do your research before. Fill out your applications. Fill out the surveys for us and your teachers. Draft your essay and revise it a couple times. Get feedback from your English teacher. Get feedback from your counselor. Send your SAT scores. If appropriate, have a conversation with your counselor and your parents. And most important, meet with your counselor sooner rather than later so that you can be successful. Parents, we ask for your help as well. There is a lovely survey on SCORE that we would love for you to fill out. Now is not time to be humble. It informs our letters of recommendation and really just helps put your son into words that sometimes they cannot capture themselves. Develop a family plan. Do not talk about college every night at dinner. You are going to drive each other crazy. Designate certain hours and certain nights to have those conversations. Decide how often you're going to meet with your counselor. Who should be involved in those meetings? If you're going to send SAT scores, coordinate those with your parents. There's a credit card involved. Assist with research. Make sure they have the right access to resources. We have most of these resources on hand here at CM, so encourage them to seek them out. Attend the counselor coffees that we'll have in the fall. And finally, the financial aid application is complicated. There's lots of tax forms. It's very difficult for a student to navigate on their own. That opens October 1st, so I highly encourage parents, if you could be involved in that process and take the lead, your sons will thank you. And then finally, what can you count on us to do? You can count on us to craft a counselor letter that is unique to your son's abilities and talents and experiences. You can count on us to assist with their college list and provide feedback, making sure that it's balanced and make sure that every school is a good academic match. You can count on us to facilitate student workshops and our rep visits, which happen pretty much every single day here on campus. You can count on us to coordinate and deliver those important documents that have to go to colleges, students' transcripts, letters of recommendation, their school profile. You can count on all of us to send those materials through SCORE. And finally, you can count on us to help monitor your son's timelines and outcomes. So these are very important deadlines and dates to be aware of. Many schools' early decisions and early actions, if you're thinking about applying early, you're looking at a November 1st deadline. So if you feel like you are interested in going early or you're not sure, now would be a good time to start talking to your counselor about that. If you are applying regular decision, you're looking more at a January or possibly February deadline. So good to have those deadlines in mind as we move forward. I am now going to turn over to Mr. Claiborne. He's going to kind of talk about the nuts and bolts of SCORE, which should become your best friend this year.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about SCORE, not to be confused with Squire, which all the boys say, Squire. No, it's SCORE. So, just like Rachel was talking about, we have the rep visits that are here on campus. I'm just going to kind of walk through how you can access those rep visits, how you can get yourself signed up, and make sure you don't miss out. So if you see here at the top of the screen in the little profile section right there, you click on that little tab right there. That tab will open up the drop-down menu. That drop-down menu brings you down to events and deadlines. That's where all of our events and our deadlines are put in through SCORE, so that way you'll be able to track everything. It has dates, times, and everything, so you know exactly what, where everything's going on. So a little bit about the, in-person and virtual rep visits. So when you open up the events and deadline tab, it's going to bring you here to all the upcoming events and all the upcoming office hours. Well, we don't have office hours right now, but all the upcoming visits. And what you're basically just going to do, you're just going to go in, you'll find the office, you'll find the visit that you're looking for. You'll click on the Count Me In tab. Once you click that Count Me In tab, you're counted in. So over here on the left-hand side of the screen, you see it has all the upcoming visits. It has visits from my colleges, so I'll get into that a little bit more as you see your list there. And then only registered visits. So you click the tab, you get logged in, you're in. You'll get a pass from us in our office in the morning time. We'll meet you. You'll come grab a pass. It'll excuse you from class. So you guys are excused to come down. Don't worry. You'll be excused from the class that you're in right there, and you'll come down for the rep visit. The beautiful thing about SCORE is it's very interactive. All right, there's a lot of different things that you can do inside SCORE, and the biggest tool that we have is being able to research the different colleges. So back in the day, it was like you had to open up a book, you figure out the school, then you had to read through. Now, SCORE is a lot more interactive. You can type in the school that you're looking for. You can go to, I believe there's about 300 different schools on there that you can search through. Simply just type in the school that you're looking for. You can change it by demographic. You can change it by, what program you're looking for. You can change it for a bunch of different reasons there, but once you open that up, it's fun to explore. Now's the time to explore. Go see more about the school. All right, they have a bunch of different information that they provide. They provide tuition information. They provide demographical information. They provide just a bunch of different analysis. They provide a scattergram so you can see where you are in correlation to other students that have applied from CM. So now's a good time to start getting into your research aspect. So this part here, this part's really important. So all the guys that are either using the app or on the computer, this is where we start to generate our list. All right, the good thing is when you move from the left to the right, things begin to get more real. All right, so we have suggested schools that we add onto your list here on the left-hand side. You'll see here it says suggested by Mr. O'Keefe. All right. So your counselor will suggest some schools. Also, parents, as you're in the app, you can suggest some schools as well. Once you put that on the suggested side, the student can access that, go through. As we move it over to the following side, now you're moving it to the following side. We went through the suggested side. Following side is actually a little bit more interesting to us, so we put it on the following side. That's when the school will also be able to start sending you some information, some important deadlines, or just some little tabs here or there just to give you more information about the school. Then, after you meet with your counselor, things start to get a little bit more real. We've had a nice conversation. We've narrowed it down to about 6, 7 schools that you're like, hey, I'm for sure applying here. You're going to slide it over to the applying side. As I said, once you slide to the right, it gets a little bit more real, all right? So there you'll see, it'll ask you, what deadline are you applying for? Are you applying for early action? Are you applying for early decision? Are you applying for regular decision? Once you designate which one you're applying for, it's going to show up on the applying side, and it's going to give you the exact deadline, and it's going to keep that listed there. Now, you still have to apply through Common App, all right? You still have to apply through Common App, but we are able to send all of your documents and all your information through SCORE as your counselors. So be helpful to us, all right? When you apply to a school on Common App, make sure you slide it over to the applied side, all right? That's what's gonna help us. We're gonna get a ping, we'll get an alert. It'll allow us to be able to go in and say, hey, such and such is applied to Merrimack. Now we can send out the documents on behalf on the applied side, all right? So this list, it starts to become more real, as I said, as we go to the right. So just keep that in mind. Now, the next important piece, all right, is requesting a teacher recommendation, okay? But as we say in our office, it's best to ask them in person as opposed to getting a surprise email. Typically, you want to have a conversation with the teacher, just give him or her a heads up, just let them know, hey, I had you for sophomore English, and I think we had a good bond, and would you be willing to write me a recommendation? All right, teacher says yes. So how do we actually get the teacher to put the recommendation on there? All right, so if you look here at the top here, at the top right, it says application documents. You're going to click on that button right there. It's going to open up. You'll see here now, this is where you're going to input all the teacher's information, all right? So you look down here on the bottom, it says teacher. You can put the teacher's first name, last name. The list is already populated in there, so the teacher's going to be found, all right? Put the teacher's information in there. Request for recommendation. What I usually tell my guys is in the message blurb, just let them know, just give them a little heads up. Hey, requesting recommendation for November 1st deadline or January 1st deadline. It just gives them that second reminder that they know that they have to get that recommendation in there. Now, what's going to be key about the recommendation is the surveys. Your teachers may know who you are. They may know exactly who you are. They see you in the building. They see you on the field. They've had one-on-one conversations with you. But there may be some intricate details that they don't know about you, and this is the time. Now is the time to answer the questions, answer the survey questions as thoughtfully and honest as possible. Be honest with yourself, so that way your teacher can write you a great recommendation. All right? So you'll see the why me teacher form. Oh, sorry, did I go? Go. All right. So a couple important deadlines to remember. All right, the teacher why me forms. All right, one for each teacher. We're asking that you guys get those in by October 8th or the first month before your deadline. Don't be the guy that goes to the teacher October 31st and you know you have a November 1st deadline. All right, student surveys, the surveys that are inside that portal right there as well, we're asking those to be done by October 8th. The parent survey is also a parent survey inside there as well. The parent survey is also crucial to the process as well because we get to see what you guys know about your child. You guys know your child better than we may know them. So we're asking that you guys complete that survey, and it might give us that last little bit of detail we can use inside of our letters of recommendation. Then we finalize the early deadline school list by October 8th or September 30th if you have an October 15th EA. And then finalize your regular deadline school list by November 12th. All right, so we can start working with those guys after the EA-ED process. So if you've already completed the junior survey, the junior parent survey, then we have your results saved. I know there was in the past we had a little bit of trouble because parents were like, I know I did it, but it's not there. We have those, so don't worry. It's all saved. Now, if I need help navigating score, where do I go? What do I do? All right? Come schedule a time with your counselor. We'll sit down, we'll open up your computer together or your phone or iPad together, and we'll actually sit there and we'll help you out and we'll navigate that process together. There's also video tutorials and articles that have been added to the on-campus in the grade 12 advisory topic section. You just go on that section right there, click score tutorials, as well in the parent portal and on campus as well. And then last but not least, the recording of tonight's presentation will actually be posted to, this week on Baker Street. And then we'll also share the slides for you at request. If you guys ask if you need any more information, we can share all that information with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kistner. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here and have you all with us. So we've talked a little bit about, the 30-foot view of what's going to be happening over the next few months. We've gone through the nitty-gritty of how we're going to get a lot of these transactional items completed. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about how do we navigate this for yourself. And much like your process, I imagine, was in choosing CM to attend high school or perhaps in middle school as well. Match and fit are important. And when we say match or fit, we're talking about learning style and academic opportunity. We're talking about the social environment and community of people that you'll be living with. And we're also talking about, the fiscal investment and what is within the means of your family to find a school that is going to be a wonderful place for you to continue to grow and develop as a person. There are going to be multiple schools that fit each of these categories for you. And our goal is to be very intentional in supporting you in identifying those schools. As you may have seen on an earlier slide, our students last year on average applied to 6 schools. I'm sure you see often in the news and media of students applying to 15, 20. I think last year there was a headline of a student that, applied and was admitted to 40 schools. That is not what we're trying to do here. We're wanting you to find the right places, that you're going to thrive and succeed in all of these categories. And it's more than education. It's 4 years of experience. It's having those aspirational goals that you're able to start chipping away at and getting involved in and growing. And we want you to find a school that values you and wants you to be a part of that community as well. All right, so I think this is the fun part, right? That's why some of us do this work, is helping you along the way. And I've had the fortune for many, many years. I was also an admissions officer who got to partner with CM, and I was able to see the other side of this journey for many CM students. What stood out to me the most in those conversations, whether it was at the college fair or at a visit, just meeting with a couple students, was that the ability for every CM student to so clearly articulate their sense of self, their purpose, their aspirational goals, and the intentionality that they brought to the conversation and wanting to learn about the school and to see, how they could potentially fit there. And so this is where we really want you to own the process, and that you've been in a really fortunate position, because this past spring, you all worked on your discernment papers, where you did a lot of self-reflection, to share who are you, who are you hoping to become, and how are you going to get yourself there, and how are we going to take all of these pieces to help you along the way to get there. That's what a lot of this process continues to be. So, if you haven't thought about that paper, and maybe summer's gone by and we're now getting in the swing of things with school, could be a great one to pull out and to continue to reflect on, because we're going to refine those elements for you throughout the way. And those college admissions trends and national shifts that we've seen that Mr. O'Keefe spoke about, that's where these elements of your self-reflection, understanding, who you are, the adaptability that you've had, the courage that you've taken in the last few years, particularly during the pandemic, that's what we're going to call these other GPA components. The college gets your transcript, your academic record is always important, but how can you best leverage yourself and your strengths throughout this process to showcase to a school who you are and how you're going to be a member of their community? So when those college admissions folks come, whether it's having a chance to speak with our guest speaker, at a later date, the college fair is coming up, the reps that are going to be coming to visit our school, I really want you to think about, what can I learn from them that I can't learn online? How is this going to be a valuable and intentional conversation and learning opportunity for me to determine if this school is going to be a good fit? Do your homework beforehand. GPAs and test scores and all those nuts and bolts are available to you. So how can you ask questions for you to really get a sense of what that school community is going to be like, what the classroom environment is going to be like? Try to make that a value add conversation. Start planting seeds of your own story with that admissions officer. Start to, practice and refining how you're going to showcase yourself to a school through an application in those conversational moments. There's a lot going on college campuses right now, a lot that you're not going to find in admissions brochure. So start identifying what's important to you, what are those non-negotiables for yourself, and start asking and turning those into questions when you're having conversations with the admissions representatives. So the big part of the application that I think gets a lot of attention in the media, or we hear and see headlines of the essay that the student was admitted to every Ivy League school and this is what he or she wrote about, tends to get a lot of flavor out there. So how can you make it great? How can you utilize it for yourself and really take control and ownership of the process? A lot of the application pieces are going to be, pretty standard in terms of looking at your courses, what activities that you've been involved in, but how can you reclaim your power in this process to really tell your story? To showcase to the admissions officers reading your application who you are as a person, what moments of resiliency, what adversity have you overcome, what lessons have you learned along the way, and where do your values lie? What's most important to you? When an admission officer receives your transcript, and I understand in theology class you also had an exercise where you got to look at a packet of files of different CM students that had graduated in past years. And you were able to look at a transcript and see letters of recommendation and see how all the pieces came together. So I want you to think about, what does my transcript say on paper? What's the story that I know about myself outside of that? And how do I tell my story for someone to understand what my high school career has looked like, who I've developed into, how have I grown, what have I learned? Have there been hills and valleys? Have things been pretty steady? What is it if I have this one opportunity to kind of have that conversation with someone reading on the other side? How can I share my craft? And a theme of the night, as you've heard, is certainly honest communication. How can we be authentic with one another throughout this process? Being vulnerable. Students, you're going to have times when, you're probably at your wit's end. You might be feeling really stressed out or overwhelmed. You might just say, I don't know what else to do. The counseling team's here to support you through those moments, through the good and the bad. It's going to be a bit of a ride, the ups and downs of this process, but we want to hear those things from you. We want you to feel comfortable to come and share, hey, this is where I'm at today. It might not be the greatest days, but unless you share that, we don't know how to support you. Parents, whether this is your first time going through the process or you've done it 3 or 4 times, it's challenging every time. There's a lot of information. Things are a little bit different at just about every school. So if you have any fears, concerns, worries, we are here to be your partner and work through that together as well. We think it's so important to just keep those doors open, keep each other informed so that we can be your best supporters and champions throughout this process. And through that all, we do hope students, that you're continuing to grow and develop and mature, that you're finding ways to advocate for yourself, to make good decisions, and that at the end you're going to find, a landing spot where you're going to be challenged. You're going to be able to continue to grow. You're going to be, make great friends and be involved in a community that's going to have a special place in your heart, just as CM has for these last several years. So we do have some resources available. Tomorrow night, we have our first parent virtual session. We've already shared that communication will be going out, but you'll see it, those will be the panel sessions coming up over the next several weeks. If you miss any, they'll be shared out through those parent communications. But certainly if you have any questions, you have any follow-up information, or you just want to sit down and have a chat, please reach out to us. We're happy to take the next steps of this journey with you all. And with that, I will turn it back to Mr. O'Keefe.
All right, thank you so much. So that's a lot of the meat and potatoes of how we're going to approach this process. A lot of this is big overview stuff so that you have it, so that you can start approaching the process. But again, it always goes back to communicating with your counselor. So it might be working with them via email, checking in over Teams, and then we'll work together. At this point, I'm so excited to introduce our guest speaker for the evening, Mr. Gregory Cherry, who joins us from Dartmouth College, where he is a Senior Associate Director of Admission. He's also the president of NECBAC, which is the Northeastern Consortium Bridging Access to College. Greg has been a fantastic friend to CM. He's an excellent sounding board when we're facing issues, and as we're going through navigating these waters, he's an excellent person to bounce ideas off and just double check myself and my thinking and where we're going as a school and how we can communicate that. And I am so excited. We had a conversation in the spring where we were kind of talking globally about, what are we doing as a school? What are national trends? And he really turned it back around on us and said, well, what are you doing to meet that moment? And that was the It was a challenging moment for us as a school to identify some of those things, and he's someone who pulls it out of you every single time. And so with that, I hope that's an appropriately glowing introduction. I am so excited to introduce our good friend, Mr. Gregory Cherry, to Catholic Memorial.
All right, good evening, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me well. Thank you, Jack, for that introduction. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be in person. I spent the last 2 years of my life in a basement, and I'm glad to see some faces. So thank you for welcoming me into your community. I'm really happy to be here. So the theme, I guess, of my talk tonight is really focused on this concept of meeting the moment. If I could have a life philosophy, if I could wrap that up and put that in a fortune cookie, and you open that cookie and you take out the little slip of paper, it would say, meet the moment. And what do I mean by meet the moment? I think that I personally believe that life is filled with moments. And a lot of those moments are positive, and a lot of those moments are not so positive. And I think when we reach those moments, we have two choices. We can either, one, meet the moment, or we can simply participate in the moment. I'm gonna take you all back about 15 years ago. I was 17 years old. I was living in Brockton, Massachusetts. And it was actually the summer right before my senior year, so I was not too far from where you all are now. I was living with my aunt and my uncle, and I was the last one in the house. I had cousins and brothers and sisters that all matriculated to colleges in Mass. So I was the only one left. But growing up with my aunt and my uncle was very challenging. My uncle was an alcoholic, and as kids, we dealt with a lot of that growing up. And on that night in June of right before my senior year, my sister came over and dropped off my 1-year-old niece for me to watch for the day. And later on that night, my sister got back to pick up my niece, and my uncle had been drinking that day, and an altercation broke out from that. The police was called. And I remember at 17 years old, standing outside watching this moment happen. And I thought about, well, what am I gonna do with that moment? I could choose to, when this is all over, to pretend that this did not happen, or I could decide to meet the moment. And I remember calling my dad and calling my older brother and saying, hey, I think I'm gonna leave this house and I'm gonna go and move with my sister. Although that house was very chaotic, it was a stable home for my siblings and I. And my sister, who had a 1-year-old daughter at the time, her home was not as stable. But I realized that this was a moment for me to choose to kind of take life in my own hand. And it was unfortunate that I was faced with that moment at 17 years old, but sometimes we don't choose when those moments come to us. So why do I share that with you today? For me personally, leaving that house that night, I believe is one of the most important decisions of my life, and it changed the trajectory of my life. I honestly believe I would not be standing in front of you today if it wasn't for that moment and meeting that moment that night. And I hope that students, as you're sitting here tonight, that you don't ever have to face a moment like that, especially at your age. So why is this relevant to you all? How many of you right now, students, have a college list? Just raise your hand. Be aware the counseling team just turned around and looked. So if you have a meeting tomorrow, you'll know why. And I love what you all have heard already, because it's going to echo a lot of what I have prepared for you all tonight. So as you sitting here tonight, you're thinking about your college lists. And parents, you may know some of those schools on those college lists. My question to you all tonight is, how will the colleges on your list prepare you to meet the moments of today. You know, I love that I got to follow up the match part of the presentation because it talked a lot about not focusing on the names of the schools. But the places you have interest in right now, how will they prepare you to meet the moments of today? There are things that are happening on college campuses right now that are concerning, and they do require some level of training, some level of preparation. And it's on us as colleges and universities to help prepare you. You are receiving a lot of the preparation now here at CM. But it's going to be on us too to help prepare you. When I was a first-year student, I went to a small private liberal arts school in Kentucky. I remember sitting in a cafeteria, probably the same size as this gym, and there were posters all over the wall. The institution that I attended, Greek life, about half of our students were Greek. And Greek life dominated the events on campus, dominated the parties on campus. And they would advertise their parties and their events all over the cafeteria during the week. So, as students know where you could go on a Friday night or a Saturday night. And my friends and I remember we saw a poster that was, at the time, it was inappropriate. It was inappropriate towards women. It was inappropriate specifically towards women of color. But you can imagine you are a freshman sitting there, you're having these thoughts, and you're like, I know this is not right, but what do I do? And we were at a place, again, that Greek life was very dominant on campus. They had a lot of influence on our student activities. But I remember we got up, and we ripped down the poster from the wall. And you can imagine how nervous and afraid that we were. But we had a moment. We saw a moment, and we realized that we can sit here like every other student that walked in lunch that week and participate in the moment, or we can meet the moment. So you can imagine the chaos that broke out in the lunchroom that day. So we had a meeting later on that week with the dean of students, a lot of the Greek leadership, Greek organization leadership, and a few of us who did that, and we expressed to them why we thought that was inappropriate. And there was a lot of discussion that happened at the college, and from that moment on, every event that was advertised to students at the college had to receive permission or approval from the student life office. You can imagine we were not the most liked students the rest of that freshman year on campus. But again, we were in a place where we were encouraged to speak up. We were encouraged to stand up for what we believe is right. And I want to make sure that as you're sitting here today, as your college list is coming together, that you're choosing institutions that you believe will help prepare you, that you believe will create a space for you to grow and mature. So how will the colleges on your list prepare you for the moments of tomorrow? If you've watched the news over the last 3 to 5 years, our country's experienced a lot of turmoil, whether it's political, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's the hurricanes, natural disasters have happened. There are a lot of things happening in our country. There's a few days ago, we commemorated 20 years since 9/11. I'm old enough to remember sitting in, I think it was 6th grade during 9/11 and wondering what was the chaos all about. So as you're sitting here today, the colleges that you are choosing should prepare you for the moments of tomorrow. There are a lot of things that are going to happen moving forward that unfortunately we can't see, we can't predict, but we're going to need you to be prepared and ready to deal with those moments. After I graduated college, I stayed at my institution for an additional 7 years. I spent 5 years in admissions office and 2 years in student affairs. My last year at the college, there was a student protest. So this was spring of 2018. A huge group of students, very diverse, went into the main building on campus where the president's office sat and slept in that office for 3 consecutive days. Never left the building. They never left for food. They never left to go take a shower. They never left to go to class. because they felt that the college was not meeting the moment. They felt that the college did not deliver what they promised them when they enrolled at the college. And I was asked to be one of the facilitators for the students with some of the demands that they were making of the administration. And I remember one particular moment, as I think about what I heard earlier about radical inclusion, one particular moment came to mind about that particular, those 3 days. The students were demanding that the college hire a couple of additional staff members to help work specifically with students of color on campus. They felt that they needed an office and they needed more staff to help support and meet their needs. And I remember the college pushing back saying, hey, our budget is set. We don't have any more money in this budget to hire more staff. And I remember one of the students speaking up, and the student said, well, earlier this year, the HVAC system in our 300 student residence hall went out, and overnight, the college replaced that HVAC system. And I remember the administration said, well, the HVAC system helps to protect students, particularly in the winter. It helps to keep the building warm and it helps to keep the building cool. They said that was a matter of your safety. And I remember sitting there listening to, I was in a room with the college president, I was in a room with the college attorney, I was in a room with the chief financial officer of a college, I was in a room with adults who have children on their own, and I saw how they were missing the moment. They didn't understand what the students were asking. And the HVAC system example was so real because the students were saying the additional staff that we're asking is our HVAC system. We don't feel safe, we don't feel protected on this campus. And I felt like I had to meet the moment and stand up and really explain to pretty much my boss, on the grand scheme of things, why the students were asking for what they were asking. And I believe that my undergraduate experience, the adults, the mentors I had in undergrad really helped prepare me for those moments, to really learn how to speak up for when we know something is not right, or to speak up for those whose voices may not be heard. Those students had to sleep on the floor for 3 days for an administration to hear their voices. So that's what I want to challenge you students with today. As you're creating your college lists, be very mindful of who those colleges are that are on your list. I want you to challenge us admissions counselors who are visiting your high school, either in person or virtually. Ask us the tough questions. Don't just put us on your list because we have your major. Don't just put us on your list because we're the right size or we're the right location or we have good financial aid. Although good financial aid is always a good reason to put a school on your list. I work at Dartmouth. I'm sure there are many students that apply to Dartmouth because we're an Ivy League institution. I'm sure there are a lot of students that apply to Dartmouth because of our Dartmouth plan and where we give flexibility to students to study on campus or do an internship at home or study abroad. But for me, as I stand in front of you today, I want you to if you're going to put Dartmouth on your list, I want you to put Dartmouth on your list because you believe we match your values. Because you believe that we're going to live up to our mission, which is to prepare you for a lifetime of learning and of responsible leadership. That you believe that we're actually going to deliver on that promise. That we're not just saying that because we want you to be a number on our campus. If you allow me for a second to nerd out a little bit, I was a philosophy major in college, so I feel like that just makes you a nerd automatically. Nevitt Sanford is a psychologist, and he writes a lot about student development. And he has one of my favorite quotes. He says, "The amount of challenge a student can tolerate is a function of the amount of support available." I'll read that again. "The amount of challenge a student can tolerate is a function of the amount of support available." Too often, I see students and I speak with students that are interested in institutions that I've worked out for all the wrong reasons. I want you to be interested in us because you feel that we have the support to help you grow and develop over the next 4 years of your life. Ask us about how we are supporting students academically, socially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Ask us the tough questions. You know, I love earlier the challenge that was given to you is that when you meet with your counselor to talk about your list, to meet with a purpose. Well, approach this process with a purpose. When you come to our visits, whether it's in person or virtual, come with a purpose, come with questions to ask. And not just questions you can find on our website, but questions that's going to force folks like me to think about why did I come to visit a place like Catholic Memorial? Why do I want your students on my campus? As we're still navigating a world of COVID, what are we doing to ensure that you're going to be safe on our campus? And not only safe physically, but safe mentally and emotionally as well. I want to talk briefly about meeting the moment with authenticity. This college application process that you all are in right now is a moment. And students, I think it's going to be up to you at some point, for some of you very soon, November, December, you're going to be met with another moment. And it's going to be up to you to decide whether you're going to meet that moment or you're just going to simply participate in that moment. So what does it look like to meet this in an authentic way? The first thing that comes to mind is to tell your story, but not the story you think I want to hear. Not the story you think the colleges that you're applying to want to hear to make you a better candidate. No, we want to hear your story. The more we hear your story, the more we can have a better understanding of who you are going to be on our campus. Tell us your dreams, tell us your aspirations. Even if you're not sure what those are. When I went to college, I thought I was gonna be a government major, and I thought I was gonna go to law school. I'm 32, my parents are still asking about law school. And I'm like, I don't have another 3 years of college in me. So even if you don't know what you're gonna do, tell us anyway. Help us get a better understanding of who you are. Tell us, how did you get here? How did you get to be a senior at CM? What was that journey like? Tell us the obstacles. Tell us about the victories. I always say, the more I know about you, the more I can advocate for you. If your application is vague, then when we get into committee and I am making a case for you, my case will be vague. And just to kind of take you all behind, the curtain, when we get into committee, typically in admissions, most of the time we're not talking about GPAs. We're not talking about test scores. And I love all the information you're getting about different levels of colleges. You get to the more selective colleges in the country. When we get to that committee, every student that's in that room with us, all the applications that are in that room with us, academically, we believe they can do the work here. It's everything else that's really part of the conversation at that point. Is who are you, and how are you going to make an impact on our campus? So as you're writing your application, as you're working your application, give us some insights into who you are. Take us behind the curtain. One of the best essays I've read, and I still remember this, and I read this a very long time ago, was a young lady from Guatemala. And she wrote about making a meal with her mom. And, typically we're like, okay, you kind of start, you're like, where is this essay sort of going? But her point was, when she goes away to college, she's going to miss that moment with her mom at home. That every night she comes home for school, and her mom would make dinner together for the family. Like, I'm a visual learner, so that takes me behind the curtain of that student's life. So as you write your application, as you meet with us, take us behind the curtain. The more I know about you, the more when I walk into that committee room, I can vouch for you. I can say, hey, here's what I see in this application. Here's why I think we should admit this student, because he's going to come here and have this impact on our campus. And here's why I think we need this student on our campus. Not necessarily, well, they have a 3.9 GPA or they have a 1400 test score, because again, at that point, we already believe you can do the work academically. So mentioning your academic is really not going to make the point in the room. As I think back of my senior year of high school, I was a very good student in high school. As I mentioned earlier, with the difficulties at home, home was not always the safest place for me. So I took a lot of that energy, I put a lot of that energy in school. So I did very well. I graduated, I was valedictorian of my class in high school. But as I think back, that was 10 years ago. No, that's a lie, I'm older than that. That was 14 years ago. As I think back of that senior year, had I applied to a place like Dartmouth, I wouldn't have gotten in. As I think about it, had I applied to any of the selective colleges and universities in New England, I would not have been admitted to any of them. But that does not take away from what I accomplished in high school. And that's the same thing for you. As you are applying to colleges, what you have accomplished, what you have overcome, is not negated by a college decision. Our decision on your college application does not change who you are. It does not change your story. It does not take away from how a great job your parents have done to raise you and how they have prepared you to meet the moment. This process goes both ways. You're probably going to get rejected at some place, and you're going to reject a lot of places too. You know, I say it every year. Every year I get heartbroken. You know, they teach us admissions not to get overly attached to students, but it's impossible because you all are amazing. And every year I get attached to students. And then every year I get that phone call, and you know what that phone call is like. Hi, Mr. Cherry. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, oh no. And it's like late April, you get a phone call, I'm like, no. Because I feel like the ones that tell us yes, we never get the phone call. We just kind of get the notification. But when I get the phone call, I'm like, be professional, be professional. You know, so the decision that you're going to get has no bearing on who you are. Your story is who you are. Your journey is who you are. So share that story with us and be authentic in that story. Don't try to be someone else. If you're not a good writer, that's okay. I'm still not a good writer. You know, I have a very good friend of mine who was an English major in college, and anytime I write cover letters for jobs, anytime I'm writing an important message, I say, hey, Jackie, I need you to read this. That's okay with me. We're not looking for students to be perfect. It's okay if you have weaknesses, share those things with us as well. Don't be afraid to let us know who you are. You will be surprised. I've always said, maybe one day if I become dean somewhere and legally they allow me to do this, I will try to do this. I've always said if we could have one parent in our admissions committee every year, I think it would change how you all see this process, to see how much us as counselors fight for your students in this process. But we cannot fight for you if we don't know who you are. We cannot fight for you if you're not authentic with us, if you're not vulnerable with us. You know, I always, when I meet with students, I always share my story because I think, you know, I love what Mr. O'Keefe said earlier. I didn't go to a highly selective college. I think I turned out okay. There's not an equation to success that you have to go to an elite institution in order to be success. It's how do you define success? You know, when you're putting your activities or the things that you're involved with outside the classroom, put the things that you value, the things that you enjoy, not necessarily what you think we want to hear. You know, I love when I see that students are babysitting, especially when it's babysitting your sibling, because you can't get rid of them. You can't give them back. You know, I have a 20-month-old toddler. She was home with me today, and I was like, I can't give her back. You know, I was like, I'm like, where can there's no way, she's here. So I value when I see that students put things on their application. I'm like, wow, I learned a little something about you through your extracurricular. Not that These things are not things that when we're sitting in a room that are gonna make or break whether we take you or not if you were president of your class. It just gives us an insight into who you are as a person. So don't just apply to schools because they are selective. Don't just apply to schools because that's where you think your parents may want you to apply, or that's where you think the counseling staff wants you to apply. Don't apply early decision because that's your way of beating the system. Apply to schools that you believe will help you meet the moment. We need more young people like you to help our country and our world meet the moment. So choose the place that will inspire you to grow. Choose the place that when you met the students or when you met the staff and the faculty, you're like, those people are the type of people I want to be around for 4 years. Choose where you want to learn and mature. Engage our students. You know, I love when I can put a current student in front of you because I believe they are in the trenches. They can give you a better idea of what to expect on our campus. So as I close tonight, I hope what you will take with you tonight, students, is this process is about you. It's not about us. It's not about the colleges. It's about you. It's not about us choosing you. It's about you choosing us. So don't let us off the hook. Don't meet with me for 30 minutes and not ask me tough questions about why you should come to my institution. It's not about why we should admit you. It's why should you come? When you get that admit packet, why should you decide to come to us? Because we are the ones who are lucky to have you. It's not you who is lucky to have Dartmouth on your degree. It's we are lucky to have you on our campus. We are lucky to have you come and sit in our classroom, to have you come and join our organization, to have you come be part of our community. So I hope that as you approach this process this year, you will approach it with a different perspective. A perspective of wanting to meet the moment and then choosing a place that will help you to meet the moments of today and to also meet the moments of tomorrow. Thank you.
We do have, I know it's been a long evening and we appreciate everyone staying. We definitely have time for a few questions right now. If you have questions for Greg or me that maybe something was unclear from our presentation or something, national trends, other things that you've heard that maybe we could just speak directly to, we'd be happy to talk you through that as well. We're very friendly people. Yeah. So the question is, what is the best way to find out what drives a school, how a school defines its values? Maybe I'll answer that in a very general way, and then I'll let you take it in a deeper way. We definitely challenge, schools will post their mission statement and they'll post their values. And I think you can read 100 mission statements and they can start to bleed together, but then you can also start pulling out key words that matter to those places. People put years into developing and crafting those mission statements, and so considering that when you're reading it and that each word is intentional and who has the words that align with who you are and which schools do not, I think that's a very surface level way. As you go deeper, and I think that's where Greg would step in terms of the more people you meet and how you have those challenging conversations, you would learn more. Do you want to hop in right there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate the question. I think you can go on every website and find every college mission statement. Those things, as you said, those things are tested. Those things are researched. To me, those don't always tell us what we need to know because we know you're going to go on our website and to read those things. So we make sure they're well prepared so that when you read them. My take is when you visit our campus and you have us in front of you, ask us how we are doing that. So if there's something that, if you read part of our mission statement, you're like, so for example, Dartmouth College, we say that we prepare you for a lifelong journey of responsible leadership. So when you come to our campus, ask us, well, what does that mean? How are you defining responsible leadership, and how are you preparing your students to do that? Because if we put it up there, that means hopefully we are doing it, or we will have an answer to that. And then I want you to think about what's valuable to you. What are your values? What do you want to know? I know for me now, I am very selective, probably not a good word here, of where I choose to work. As an African American male, where I work, I like to think that that work represents who I am. So to give you a good example of this, when I interviewed for Dartmouth in May, I had dinner with our vice president of enrollment. And I remember, obviously you're nervous. I was thinking, should I order something to drink or not? Is that okay in a job interview? But I remember thinking, I'm not going to let him off the hook. I know this is my interview, so I asked him, I said, knowing what we know about Dartmouth College and this prestige institution, I said, is there room for the little guy here? And what I meant by that is, as we are getting all these applications, we're making these decisions, is there room for us to advocate for first-generation college students, for low-income students, for rural students? Is there room here for LGBTQ plus students? Like, is there room for those students, and is that voice welcome in those admissions room? And I felt like that was an important question for me to answer, and his answer to that question, to me, was going to dictate whether I was going to partner with Dartmouth College. So it's the same thing for you. As you're asking us these questions, make sure that the answers that we're giving to you are good enough for you to decide whether you want to partner with us as well.
Great question. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and we get it every single year. And what I would say in our process, there are very good outside recommenders, and there are not so great outside recommenders. You could have somebody who has known your son since he was 3 years old, and he does valuable service work with that person every year, and they do wonderful things. And like Greg, they're just not an excellent writer, right? And so that letter, or they don't know how to write a letter of recommendation. So it is, sometimes those will come through. I would say they should send a letter to the counselor, and then we'll talk about that in our process. If we think it will help, we will include it in the application, in those supporting documents. If we do not think it will help, and there are, every once in a while, you get a recommendation where it's like, I don't know if this hurts a student, but it definitely doesn't help them. If we think it falls into that category, then we'll hold it back. And nobody's going to know about it, right? Like, a college admissions rep is not going to call up and say, hey, why don't you have an employer letter right here? We also get requests sometimes about, should I have a letter from an alumnus write a letter for the school that my son is applying to? My son is applying to Dartmouth, our neighbor went to Dartmouth, and yada, yada, yada. Again, I would go back to the name on the bottom of the letter is not as important as the story that is contained within the letter. If that person knows your son well and can speak to his character and his challenges and how he's overcome obstacles, that's a great letter, and the person's name on the bottom of it does not really matter that much. If it is someone who it's like, oh, I know this guy and I think he gave some money at some point, maybe he can write a letter and move the needle, I would not recommend a letter in that situation. So, that feels great question, though, and we get it every year, so thank you for asking it. Other questions? I've been doing this on Zoom for so long. You have that like Zoom pause when you ask a question, so I'm still sort of living in that moment. But all right, the counselors are going to stick around for a couple minutes. Greg is also going to stay here for a few minutes just in case you have any sort of one-on-one questions you want to ask to any of us up here. Thank you again all for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. It was great seeing you in person, this sort of radical inclusion of people, pulling people back into the building. And we are so looking forward to working with you over the next couple months in the year. Thank you so much and have a great night.